Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter, and I've been your beat reporter covering the Jacksonville Jaguars for On SI every single day since August 2019, and we are continuing to march forward through another offseason together. As always, you can always find our 100% free, boots on the ground, 24/7 coverage of the Jacksonville Jaguars day in and day out when you follow us on social media such as Facebook and Twitter at Jaguars on SI. You can also find us at www.si.com/NFL/Jaguars. Welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. Today we are going to take a look at the 4 head coaches around the AFC South and go ahead and weigh in on who we think has the potential to be amongst the top coaches in the division and who we think is earing more towards Gus Bradley type coach. Again, no offense to Gus Bradley, but it's very clear that the AFC South might have some lame ducks in the division. First up, I think when you look at the AFC South, the first team that you have to talk about right now is Houston Texans and DeMeco Ryans. And that isn't any way of conflating what the Texans have done. They were a flawed but best team in the AFC South last year. They obviously, took the league by storm in 2024 and 2023, and CJ Stroud's rookie season, and with DeMeco Ryans' rookie season as head coach at the helm. I think when you look at just what they've done over the last 2 seasons, again, winning the AFC South, it's not necessarily the hardest thing to do. It's in a lot of ways being the skinniest kid at fat camp in terms of NFL divisions. There hasn't been a true dominant division winner in several years now. But when you look at how this division is constructed and what the Texans had to do to climb back into relevancy, I don't think there's any way you can say anybody but DeMeco Ryans is the top coach in the AFC South right now. Now, of course, we still haven't seen Liam Cohen, who we will get to. We've seen Shane Steichen for several years now. Brian Callahan, I think you guys all know my thoughts on him, but we will, of course, get to the Brian Callahan section. We're going from top to bottom, so of course we will not be talking about Brian Callahan at the start of the episode. But DeMeco Ryans, I think, if you just look at where the Houston Texans were before he got there, the Coley era, the Lovie Smith era, they were a preposterously bad team. A preposterously bad franchise. They had so many things going on in the front office, off the field, etc. Obviously, the Deshaun Watson, debacle, etc. became a very big talking point. They ended up making out very well from that situation, which of course has helped DeMeco Ryans as he's become a head coach. But I think overall, there's no argument that can be made against what he's produced. Now, yes, has he taken the Houston Texans from worst to first in a stacked division? No, he hasn't. If there's any division over the last few years who you can go from worst to first in, it's the AFC South. The Jags did it. Houston Texans did it the next year. It's very possible. I don't anticipate the Tennessee Titans doing it, but I'm not going to act like this wouldn't be the division to do it. They wouldn't do it in the AFC North. They wouldn't do it in the NFC East. But the AFC South, at least that door is open. So I understand that constraint. I understand that talking point. But to me, simply put, if you look at where the Houston Texans were before DeMeco Ryans got there, and you look at where they're at now, I think you just have to give him a lot of credit. Him and his staff have developed players. He obviously has pushed the right buttons in terms of what the franchise needed. I don't think DeMeco Ryans is, say, a top 10 head coach in the NFL. I'm not sure I'd go that far because you have some great head coaches. You have Harbaugh, you have Andy Reid, you have Mike Tomlin, you have Sean McVay. You have so many great coaches up and down the NFL that I'm not sure he's a top 10 coach. But that's also because the Houston Texans haven't proven to be a top 10 team. But I do think he's a very good head coach. And as of right now, has the best resume of any head coach in the AFC South. Now, whether that will remain the case, we'll see how that goes over the next couple of years. Now, that they have the target on their back, now that they're seen as the top dog in the division, I don't think anybody really saw them as the team to hunt in the AFC South last year, even though I know they got a ton of hype before the season, etc. I just think that, they had to scratch and crawl and barely win the AFC South to begin with in 2023 that I'm not sure anybody really saw them as, okay, this dominant team that they're clearly chasing. Now, again, last year they weren't a dominant team, but when you win the AFC South 2 years in a row, I think they have at least earned the status of best team in the AFC South, and that's why I think, as of right now, he's the best head coach in the AFC South. The guy who I think very quickly can show he's the second and even make an argument for the first, I'll say Liam Cohen. And I say that because we've seen who Brian Callahan is as a coach. We've seen who Shane Steichen is as a coach. Steichen's on a different tier than Callahan. He's not, I don't think, a bad coach by any means, but he's very, I don't know, he's, white toasted bread. I mean, he's as average, really, to me, as it gets. Liam Cohen, I think, has the potential to be much more than that. And, of course, the potential to be much more than the lowly, coach that Brian Callahan has so far shown to be. I'm not ready to say, he's up there competing with D'Amico Ryans yet, because we still have to see him coach a game, but from his offensive prowess, which I'm not sure Steichen has ever really shown that he has to a high degree, to what he's already changed about the Jaguars in their culture inside the building. I mean, I've said this before. I said it in an interview last night. I've talked to people in that building since Liam Cohen got hired. And since obviously Tony Bozzelli and James Gladstone got hired too. But Liam Cohen specifically. I've talked to people in the building, people in the locker room, and Liam Cohen has changed the culture to the sense that players are no longer, in my opinion, afraid to speak up or afraid to be themselves. I mean, the Jaguars, very much so in the last several seasons, have been a franchise where the franchise leaders are more or less saying, it's our way or the highway. We're not going to be different. We're not going to go outside the box. We're going to do things kind of a paint-by-numbers kind of structure. Liam Cohen, in my belief, is going to be the opposite kind of head coach of that. So, what he's done as an offensive play caller, what he's done already in the culture in Jacksonville, I think, he obviously has to prove it on the fields on Sundays. But I think Liam Cohen, by the end of the season, will be known as the second best head coach in the AFC South, who very easily could have a chance to leap to number one, depending on how things are going on the field. Number 3, Shane Steichen. Now, he's obviously been dealt some bad cards. The quarterback position's been a complete debacle. I don't think anybody can blame him for Anthony Richardson not developing so far. Anthony Richardson was a dart throw, like all draft picks are, but especially Anthony Richardson. He had a lot of injuries, a lot of bouts of inaccuracy, lack of experience. As a prospect, there were a lot of red flags, but there was also the thought that, hey, if he reaches his potential, you might have the next Cam Newton. So I'm not going to blame him for Richardson not developing or not taking the step. It was just a very realistic scenario of what would happen if they had drafted him. But I will say, it does seem like under him the Colts have kind of been treading water. Now, I know they probably have been better than the end of the Frank Reich era and obviously, the Jeff Saturday era, but still, I firmly believe that Shane Steichen right now, as far as NFL head coaches go, is he in the top 16 or so? No, I think he's probably somewhere in the 20s, and I just think that's what the Colts have played like during his tenure, and that's what I see them playing like moving forward. Lastly, it's got to be Brian Callahan. I don't know what exactly Titans fans are hoping to see from him this year. Like I've said before, I think Cam Ward's going to be a solid quarterback. I think he's exponentially better than Will Levis. And Will Levis, I've said this in an earlier podcast this week that in my 6 years covering the NFL, in terms of quarterbacks I've seen live in person, it's probably the worst starting quarterback I've seen. That Bryce Young game was pretty bad, but I think Bryce Young's a good bit better than Will Levis. So I'm not sure, is it entirely fair to say what do they have in Brian Callahan when he got shackled with Will Levis? Maybe not. But still, in terms of the culture last year, they were terrible. In terms of the on-field results, they were terrible. I'm not sure he even offers that much in terms of the scheme. And I'm not sure how much is going to change this year. You have a rookie quarterback. You have one good receiver in Calvin Ridley, and then a bunch of guys who, would have to fight for spots on the Oak Leaf Junior High Yellow Jackets offense. at the end of the day, I think Brian Callahan, very well could be looking for a new gig this time next season. Thank you guys for listening to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter. Please make sure that you follow, like, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all other podcast platforms. And go ahead and find us on YouTube as well at Sports Videos on SI.